Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sport Federation TV, where, of course, every week we take a look at what's happening with sport in the Western Cape. We've got cycling tonight. We're talking about men's gymnastics. And we are also going to be now talking to Sylvia Bruckner. She is the chairperson of the Western Cape Provincial Sport Confederation's Safeguarding Commission. Safeguarding is, of course, an important aspect to make sure that our athletes are protected from harassment and abuse. But to tell me more about that, we've got Sylvia on the line with us now. Sylvia, welcome back to Federation TV.
Thank you very much, JP.
So this is our first opportunity to talk to you about safeguarding. You're, of course, normally in the equestrian seat, and you are, of course, now the chairperson of the Safeguarding Commission for the Western Cape Provincial Sport Confederation. Maybe I think if we can just start at the beginning, for everybody that's watching right now, what exactly is safeguarding?
So safeguarding is to ensure that especially our vulnerable athletes are kept free from abuse. And abuse is a very wide range, but to keep them safe from abuse.
So when you're talking about athletes, you're talking about all different sport codes. What we understand is that it's now a national policy that all sports structures in South Africa must have a safeguarding policy.
Yes. So SASCOC has a safeguarding policy, and in that policy, they indicate that every sport code in South Africa must have a safeguarding policy. And you will also find that most sporting codes, their international body will also have a safeguarding policy, especially those sports or codes that are Olympic sports.
So just give us, I mean, you're from the world of equestrian. Just give us a sort of a practical application. How would that happen if we use your sport code as equestrian? How would one use that? Or how do they go about using it in sport? We've in fact got gymnastics on the show with us tonight as well. And we know gymnastics has been quite proactive in making sure that safeguarding policies and structures are being implemented. But what does it mean for the person from a practical perspective?
So I think there are two aspects. The one is to ensure that our athletes are kept safe. So there are many things that a sporting code can do to ensure that vulnerable athletes are kept safe. They need to make sure that poor practices or poor sport practices are nipped in the bud, because when you have bad behavior, one thing can lead to another. So I think putting discipline back into the sport and making sure that everybody adheres to the agreed codes of conduct and that you enforce that is important. Also to do risk assessments. So where is it likely that an athlete could experience some kind of abuse, and to put mitigating measures into place, and to ensure that designated safeguarding officers are at large sporting events, that they've been checked, those events and those venues, to make sure that the athletes are safe. And also those codes that go on tours, obviously there are also areas where one wants to make sure that the athletes are completely safe. So there are many other examples.
I mean, when you're talking about an athlete being safe, you're not talking here about safety as in fire extinguishers and first aid kits. You're specifically talking about the elements that are defined as safeguarding.
Yes, and specifically abuse. And abuse has a big range. So it can be from physical assault, sexual assault at that level, right down to bullying, hazing, and all those sort of psychological abuses that people could experience, or athletes could experience. So I think keeping athletes safe is the one side, but then also ensuring that if an incident happens or incidences, that the athlete is able to then report that in a way in which they are protected and safe, in order to bring that out and to then allow the sport to investigate it and see to what extent there's merit in this, and then to take the necessary action to ensure that athlete and other athletes' safety.
Do you think we currently have a situation where athletes in sport, vulnerable athletes in sport, maybe don't know that they have got recourse?
I think they are. So, as a confederation, we check in with our sporting codes on a regular basis to see where they are. And I'm pleased to say that there's been a huge increase in sporting codes now having their federation policy, safeguarding policies in place, safeguarding officers in place. And at least 60% of them are reporting that they have mechanisms of anonymous reporting available. The problem is, I think, is that many athletes are not always aware of it, and there's a lot of space in terms of marketing what the sport code does. Anything from obviously, digital advertising, but also simple things like putting up posters in cloakrooms and canteens and so on where they congregate, just to spread awareness that this facility is available.
Yeah. So for the moms or dads or people that are watching the show now, it, does this mean that if you're playing sport and you feel that you're being harassed or you feel like you're being abused, that as an athlete you should be able to, in any sports space, have an opportunity or a place to report that and to do so in a manner of comfort?
Yes, indeed. That's now a requirement, and in fact, everybody is obliged to do this. So it doesn't have to be a mom and dad. If you are a bystander and you see something and you see a child being abused, then it is your duty to report it to that hotline.
Can you give us a practical example of what harassment or bullying or abuse in another form might be for the athlete that is out there at the moment? How do they relate to it? Are we perhaps in a situation that some of these things have been going on for a while, and we're not, maybe athletes don't know that their rights are being infringed on?
So obviously, probably one of the common ones is hazing or bullying, especially with things like initiation. And the beginning of the year, like now, when people are selected for teams for the first time, or they come new into a club or so on, there might be practices that one needs to take a careful look at, and they're just not acceptable these days anymore. And athletes must be kept safe. So that's a practical example.
Right.
But there could be officials, coaches, quiet places, grooming children, and so on. And I think these are not things that we easily want to think about or talk about. And just because we don't necessarily see it, it doesn't mean that it's not there. So extra vigilance is required to keep our young and vulnerable athletes safe. So we're talking from children. I would say children, obviously our first priority, but I would say that high performance young athletes are also vulnerable. Disabled athletes are vulnerable. So it depends on the situation, but those are the common groups of people that we really need to keep an extra eye out for.
So at a club level, at a facility level, are there should the coaches, the administrators, should they be rolling out awareness programs at ground level to make sure that their members know about safeguarding?
Yes, indeed, and it's now mandatory that clubs must check their employees, all employees, including their coaches, and do the background checks and do the police checks to make sure, because these people have the most access to children, and so now it's an obligation to
But
make sure that everybody.
you should be
Yeah.
teaching your athletes about safeguarding. You should be
Oh
explaining to
yes.
them.
Yes, it's important. So an awareness is critical, even if it's a half an hour to 45-minute talk, just to ensure that everybody in the club is aware of it.
I mean, if I think of it at ground level, surely children, vulnerable athletes out there should know that certain spaces are out of bounds for in terms of safeguarding? Things like change rooms, etc.
Yes. So again, that's where the strict codes of conduct and behavior and monitoring needs to happen.
Right. So Sylvia, this is obviously a very detailed, a lot of elements around safeguarding. You mentioned things like hazing and grooming, and I think many people would not understand what is hazing or what is grooming. The various practical applications of what you should be looking for at a club. Do you put up, as you said, branding? Do you put up, make public notifications, etc.? So we're definitely going to have to get you back on a regular basis to give us a little bit more guidance, and so that clubs and federations out there can actually take these things from us firsthand and start applying it at their sports structures.
It's a very big subject, and I think we can't talk about it enough. Thanks, JP.
Thank you, Sylvia. There we go. Folks, Sylvia Bruckner, of course, chairperson of the Western Cape Provincial Sport Confederation's Safeguarding Commission. And by now, all sports structures in South Africa should have a safeguarding policy in place. And this safeguarding policy should by now have rolled out to all of your structures at all levels to protect vulnerable athletes. But to find out more about that, go to the Sport Confederation website or to the SASCOC website. You can, of course, find the Sport Confederation website on www.wcpsc.co.za. But certainly pass on the word, and we'll be talking more about that here on the show. We'll be back in a sec. Don't go away.